Hindsighters, thank you to tuning in to In Depth with Miss Ty, and welcome to Hindsight Media Radio 103.5 FM, where there's always something good to talk about. Tonight, you're in for a real treat. We have a phenomenal leader here this evening who is going to share some very amazing information with you guys, but also intentionality, and then also just real facts, real life. We're going to get down and great with it. We're not holding any bars. We're going to do all things one, yes, professional. However, we're going to be real and raw because that's the way we like it here at Hindsight. We don't want to sugarcoat anything or anyone. We want to ensure that the intentionality is there and that when there are those that are listening, we want to make sure that this is also a safe space for you to be able to share what it is that you share and whatever it is that you believe. So, joining me this evening, I'm not going to tell you her name right away. We're going to get into that later. But what I will say is that she is a founder and principal consultant of CSB Consulting Services, which exists to disrupt the isolation, exhaustion, and attrition experienced by Black women in higher education. Through her consulting services, she supports Black women to leverage the traditions of community, gathering to form protective communities that support sustaining success while pursuing the highest academic and professional aspirations. With over 20 years of experience in K 12 and higher education, she has demonstrated an amazing expansion of the K 8 charter schools in Minneapolis, Minnesota, designing and leading identity-based learning experiences from social workers and teachers, and designing innovative professional learning programs at the University of Pennsylvania. Her research, which leverages Black feminists through the critical race feminism frameworks to uplift the challenges and resilience practices of Black women, colleges, and universities. Administrators have been presented to the American Education Research Association, National Women's Students Association, and Faculty Women of Color Association. She holds a Doctor of Education in Educational Leadership from the University of Pennsylvania and a Master's of Education from Harvard University. Listen here, this amazing woman is Dr. Chenelle Boatswain. And so listen here, last year on a social media platform, she posted about doing the work to protect our peace. And she also shared about curating a playlist of affirmations. And that's what she did. It was on being able to relax, being able to relate, and being able to release an affirmation playlist by and for Black women seeking moments to pause, breathe, and rest. It was filled with soul soothing tracks that uplift and empowered, just a companion for unwinding, reclaiming, and finding the peace and recharging the energy. And this was all curated by Dr. Chenelle Boatswain. So listen here, we're going to have a phenomenal conversation this evening. And I know the bio that I read and what I just shared doesn't do any justice because she is a woman of all amazing things. And now she has an amazing co-author that I want her to talk about. And her co-author is her AKA Cat, who helps her, is her sidekick, I guess we'll say. But we'll have her talk about that later. So right now, we're going to bring you none other than Dr. Chenelle Boatswain. Welcome to the call.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. Thank you. What a warm welcome. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. So if you don't mind, if you'll go ahead and share with the hindsighters just a little bit more about your upbringing and how did you get to where you are today?
Okay. Sure. So thank you again just for having me. It's such an honor. I I'll share a little bit about my journey. It's I think as beautiful as it is, complex as is many of our stories, I know. So I am a first generation American Caribbean girl, gal. My mom and my dad are both uh, born and raised in the Caribbean, made courageous moves to come here, bring family here. And that grounding of being Caribbean first has always felt important to me. And so I say I am Caribbean born. My family moved to Minnesota. So I have to also acknowledge that I'll say I'm Minnesota raised, not Caribbean born, sorry, Caribbean seasoned, Minnesota
Okay, okay.
raised, Jersey born. So we lived in Jersey and then Minnesota, and now I'm in Philly. And something that has really shaped my relationship with the work that I do in education, which has always been about creating or uplifting the brilliance of Black and brown children by working or with systems, designing experiences that really enhance our community's resilience, that really reflect the brilliance that we hold and have always held. And a lot of to me, what has been really important about getting into that work has been that for my family, as I know is true for a lot of people who are coming to this country for, whatever motivates them to come. But I know a lot of, especially West Indian children of West Indians, children of African parents, know that your job is to become a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer. You get the best education that's like, it's just the top value, right? And so education has always been in our family space the thing. And so for my parents, that meant that sending us to the best schools was going to be what they were going to hang their hat on. And they were willing to make whatever sacrifice was necessary to make that possible. So in my life, that looked like private schools. And so
Mm,
you named, I have a degree from Harvard, I have a degree from University of Pennsylvania. Uh, my life at my education experience took place all in predominantly white institutions.
mm-hmm,
And because I understood that the motivation was excellent education, I deeply value the sacrifices that my family has made for me um, to have access to those experiences. But and we had talked about this as a family, everything that it took for them to help me to have a powerful and grounded racial socialization, to be connected to my roots as a West Indian, to be familiar with what Blackness in America means,
mm-hmm,
often happened either outside of my school context or in contrast to things that I was experiencing in my school context. So there was a lot of, my mom was advocating often and hard on my behalf at many levels of my schooling to make sure that I was seen and valued and celebrated and all these different things, right? And it
mm-hmm.
raised a set of questions for me about what was happening that made it so that I would I couldn't experience, or that I'd had to be nourished in these ways that were really bifurcated. So I experienced affirmation of my Blackness and of um, my identity socially in spaces that were church, that were community based, that were um, my mom's sorority, which is now my sorority too, ski wee.
Mm-hmm.
But as a child, like those are the places that I was seeing and hearing and being affirmed in my Blackness. And then I was going to school and there was this intellectual experience, and it felt as though I was the bridge between those two. And that was hard for me and that was frustrating for me. And so I went into a career in education to commit to stronger integration, better integration, that you should be who you are, where you are, wherever you go, and that having access to rigorous learning um, should not require you to be separated from your core identities in order to experience that. So that's a little bit of kind of at least how my journey started.
Sure. And I guess that led into and talked about your path into education. So if we kind of pivot a little bit, you also have mentioned somewhere on your platforms that there was a time when the pressures and exclusion of academia almost silenced your voice, right? And then you had to navigate through a space where you felt isolated and unheard, became unyielding about how crucial it is for Black women and Brown women to have platforms where voices can be heard and perspectives are valued. How did you navigate through that? And how did you find your voice?
Right, right. So, my first moment of there are many moments I think where I feel like I had a chance to form a really strong sense of a professional self in my Black womanhood.
Mm,
And then I got to graduate school and I experienced a disruption that I didn't anticipate. I felt almost immediately, again, Ivy League space,
mm-hmm,
predominantly white. I felt almost immediately this experience where I went from being community leader. I had been a school leader. I did a lot of different youth programming at in the church space that I had been a part of at that time, and um, just I felt really grounded and established. And then I felt like everything that existed in me got reduced to what existed in my mind. So
mm,
it felt what I the language I have today is disembodying, but I didn't understand that at the time. All I knew is that all of a sudden it felt like the only thing that mattered was what words came out of my mouth. And if I didn't say them in a way that was so well curated or perfectly eloquent or really complex and representing a set of ideas, that I would be overlooked. And that was really it was frustrating because I just thought, no, I have a lot to offer. I know I have a lot to offer. And somehow I'm having a hard time figuring out how to make the me that I understand myself to be
right,
seen in this space. So that was for me, it became really silencing. And I think that there were lots of signals to me that moved toward that. So I'm in a space where there are very few of me. So it's hard for me to see faces that look like mine amongst peer colleagues who are also students. There were very
right.
few of Black women who were faculty. There were very few Black women voices represented in the curriculum. And then there were these ways that I was getting feedback about my work. And I had a poignant moment, particularly at the end of my first year, where we had a benchmark exam, and the other members of my cohort passed the exam, and I did not.
Mm,
And up until then, I already was going through this experience of feeling like all of a sudden being someone who used to feel really clear about what I had to say, and what I had to offer, all of a sudden became um, that already felt like it had gone away. And now I've gotten external feedback that seems to suggest that what I have to say is also not valued. And so those moments, I was ready to leave. I was literally I had relocated from Minnesota to Philly to go to school, and I was like, yeah, I don't I think I messed up. Like I think this was the wrong thing, and I was getting ready to go.
wow. So let's pivot into you worked in K-12 and higher education leadership development. So with those two mirroring each other, how did it shape your approach to teaching and mentorship? Would you even say that your voice being silent has something to even do with that?
Yeah, it's interesting. The so one of the ways that one of the unexpected moments that came up for me was when I started this experience in graduate school that I just described. My focus was almost exclusively on K-12 education. That's the space that I came out of.
Okay.
I was eager to continue doing work in the K-12 space. And for reasons that I don't know that I'll ever have the answers in this life as to why it seemed like doors were closing for me in that space.
Mhm.
But it felt like a work that I did not mean to walk away from was kind of walking away from me.
Wow.
And so I had these these really rich experiences of working with teachers, preparing teachers to, doing instruction. And I think particularly when you're doing instruction in a way that is uh, intentionally culturally affirming and relevant, which is the experience that I had in my K-12 world. We worked with a school that was serving predominantly African American students, drawing on an Afrocentric model. So all of our teachers, regardless of their cultural identities, were really organized around and committed to and invested in kind of uplifting a set of principles that were intentionally affirming of our students. So I came from that space into the space that I just described to you. Um, it gave me some seeds to carry into what then became my next phase in higher education. Um, it took a moment for me to accept that all of these moments of disruption were part of my path because, we make plans and then God laughs. And so these were not my
Yes,
plans. What was happening was not my
absolutely.
plan. Um, but the good thing about having foundations is that you can't walk away from them. You can't leave them. And so I was being presented with some new opportunities to think about, okay, what does it look like to experience or to hold cultural affirmation and centering identity as mechanisms for reinforcing resilience, which is, I think, what I was experiencing in K-12. And then it started to become a theme that felt necessary for my own journey and then the work that I was getting into in higher ed.
Absolutely. So now you've mentioned a few times about the affirmation. So earlier in the introduction, I talked about the affirmations playlist. Now, is that still something that those that need it or may want to can still find and listen to? Do you still have that in your archives, or it's still somewhere where the audience can actually hone into that?
I'm so glad you asked that. I do still have it available, and if you join me on Instagram, I should probably double check this, but I'm pretty sure it's in my link tree. And it's a small representation of the ways that I have been learning to and continue kind of growing into nurturing my my core self so that I start my days, not exclusively the start of my day, but I do start my day allowing these words to pour into me and to pour over me that help me to be clear about who I am, what gifts I bring to the world as a Black woman. And so that curated list has some really amazing artists who bring words to name the beauty and the strength of our identities as Black women.
Well, I love that. And so yes, while we're continuing to talk, if we still happen to find the exact, we'll make sure we get that for the listeners, or we can later post it in the information so that they can go find that and support and listen to that. So that leads us in when you're talking about, because to me, that's a form of coaching, right? And that's what you do. You're a
Hmm.
coach as well. So in your research and coaching, you've talked about the myths of meritocracy and isolationism in academia. So
Hmm.
how do you break those down and explain why they can be so harmful?
Yeah, right. So I think in education, and it certainly is echoed or maybe even initiated strongly
Initially,
in
yeah.
like higher education. Um, the idea that, so meritocracy, the idea that your work is uh rewarded for is evaluated in this objective way. And so you advance based on this objective evaluation of your work. Um, Hence the idea of grades, hence the idea of degrees, and it's hierarchical. Like an A is better than a B is better than a C. Uh,
Mhm,
a doctorate is higher than a master's, is higher than a bachelor's, is higher than associates, right? Like there are these ideas that we can earn by work and effort, our merit, and our merit will warrant promotion and advancement. Um, so that's one. And then I think so isolationism, really kind of thinking about there's an individuality that that concept of hard work and reward can, I think, promote, that suggests that I individually can and should accomplish these things. And we have lots of ways in the education system that reward uh, performance
mhm.
or achievement.
Achievement, yeah.
There is, however, not enough conversation or language, I don't think, in our learning spaces. And I think it shows up really, I would say I experienced it really painfully in academia when I was going through grad school, and now I've been in that space for some time. That one, work done well rarely happens independently. We almost always have somebody somewhere who's either
Mhm,
encouraging us or collaborating with us in a way, whether it's just being a listening partner, a thought partner to us, whether they're being a cheerleader, or whether they're actually hands-on in the work with us. Usually, our successes are not just individual and independent. And
mhm,
so the idea that you have to like it feels like it works if I'm doing something great and then I get rewarded for it. But it becomes challenging if I think I'm doing hard work and then I don't get rewarded for it. And so there are so many ways that that happens, particularly for Black folks and particularly for Black women, in lots of education spaces. And I think it's very blatant in higher education that our brilliance, our knowledge, our ways of knowing are often not seen and valued in the ways that academia is structured. Academia was designed for white privileged men. And so it has not grown enough yet, even though there are Black women in the academy, it hasn't grown enough yet in its way of existing to embrace the fact that there are lots of ways of knowing. And for us as Black folks, our ways of knowing and being are often collective and they're collaborative. And so there's a tension, I think, that comes up
Mhm.
with being expected to do things in ways that are highly kind of hyper independent, which I think then pulls us, I would say I certainly experience, and I think it happens for lots of folks, that it pulls us away from our communities and our grounding and our center. And so so then we become isolated or we get disconnected from our collectivism, and then we're chasing sometimes a moving target. Meritocracy is not straightforward and it doesn't exist. And so the idea that
Right.
hard work is just going to get rewarded is just not true. And it becomes painful for I think for us in particular. For I will use my story as an example of that, but I've now had the opportunity to talk to many Black women who, our exhaustion occurs because we are trying to pursue an ideal that is not aligned to who we are.
Wow. Now, do you foresee that changing through the years? Do you think it's just going to remain the same and we're going to have to conform, or because we're already conforming? What do you think that will look like in the next 2 to 5 years? Do you think there will be any improvement or acceptance at all, or just toleration?
Yeah, it's a really tough season to make
Mm,
predictions about much of anything. But what I would say, and what I'm committed to in my work is connecting Black women with each other so
mhm.
that we can recreate the bonds and reestablish the spaces that help us to be nourished. So in my business, I talk about home place, which is this beautiful reflection from Bell Hooks of the ways that Black folks have always gathered, but particularly I think about Black women kind of getting together in kitchens and, living rooms
Mhm.
and over hair and over, you know, tea and we just talk each other into life and talk each other. We build each other up in ways that help us to resist the social pressures that suggest that we should be lesser than. And so the idea of home place to me is so powerful that this is something that we already do. And if we can be intentional about keeping those traditions alive for ourselves, particularly when we operate in spaces that try to break that bond or try to move us into other ways of existing, I think there's so much that we can do uh, to experience both grounding and affirmation, even when the space that is around us is doing something different. And so I think that we are seeing ourselves in a time that the world is not going to give us I don't know that it ever gave us anything for free, but I don't think that's happening in the next 2 to 5 years. If it was gonna happen, I think it would have needed to happen before right now. So I think our next best move is to do what we can do to
Sure.
be intentional with ourselves and then with each other in community and sisterhood and partnership.
So relatability, because that's what you kind of mentioned earlier about the gathering in the homes and
Yeah.
doing the hair and the things of that sort. So tell us more about your organization, your company, CSB Consulting Services. Talk more about that.
Yes, yes. So this is an outgrowth from uh, the research that I started as a graduate student. I had the wonderful privilege of assembling uh, 15 administrators across colleges and universities across this country in the second year of the pandemic. So it was the time. We were a year out from George Floyd's murder, and we were returning to in-person work in some places on a lot of campuses and a lot of schools. We're
Mhm.
trying to figure out how to do that work. And I got to, I had hundreds actually of women who are leading across this country who expressed an interest. Ultimately, 15 were able to join me. And they created community with each other. I got to just be a fly on the wall
Mm.
and listen in on the types of conversations that they chose to engage with each other around, which are perfectly, I think, illustrative of this idea we're talking about right now about finding, people who can create space with you, spaces by us, for us, to affirm, uplift, share wisdom, share strategy, but in ways that are personally aligned. And so that was so powerful. And when we were together for a semester, and nearly everybody was like, "So what are we doing next semester? Like, are we going to keep going?" And I was like, "We absolutely should." And so this work now is about uh, supporting folks who already, if you already got a sister circle, like if you already feel like you got your people, then there are opportunities to just come with your people. And there's so much for us, I think, to talk about as Black women, to just think through what our self-protection is in this season, what our self-care looks like in this season, how do we continue to pour into ourselves and have rest, and all of those good things. So that's one way that I see my work being important to folks. But I'm particularly interested in finding folks who maybe don't have their sister circle yet. Uh,
Mm.
Particularly for folks who are so I primarily work with folks who are on college campuses, and there are lots of folks who are on college campuses where they are the only person in their department who's a Black woman. Sometimes they're the only person in their school who's a Black woman. And I think, that's what I mean by isolationism. And so I'm particularly looking for those folks who are looking for connection, who are seeking out community, who are like, yes, I need a sisterhood. To walk with me through the things that I experience on my college campus, who understand enough about higher ed, and particularly this moment in higher ed, who can help me to continue to show up as best I can in the full self that I am, and to continue to care for myself as the world is changing. And so I'm working with anyone who's interested in that, in building those types of communities and finding your sister circle.
I love that. And thank you for that awesome share, and also just giving yourself and to help people to find themselves, because it does take a village. And sometimes people do not know. I know individuals to this day that I have conversations with whom are like in their 60s and they still don't know their passion. They still don't have their voice, and they don't know how to understand or where to even start. They feel like it's too late in the game for them, right? And
Yeah.
the understanding is no, it's not too late. You just have to continue to work at it daily, but something is there, and maybe you're not in the right circles, or maybe you don't have the right person to help you navigate that field or help you to get there. So thank you for being that person for others, and we'll continue that work. So that's important.
Hmm. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So if we look ahead, if you could change one thing about the way institutions support Black women in leadership, what would it be?
Okay. Love this question. Oh, and just one, huh?
No, listen, no, ma'am, absolutely. As many as you want, whatever's necessary. This is your time. If you're not in a rush, I am not in a rush. Let's give the listeners what they want and speak as freely as you need.
The things that come to mind for me, and the things that I think I hear other Black women naming, they're unfortunately countercultural.
Sure.
Um, so sometimes I feel like I'm, you know, throwing pie in the sky, but uh, a wonderful colleague of mine has helped me to think about freedom dreaming, and so I'll put it in that frame instead. But I think supporting Black women in leadership in any space is about this dynamic that we're actually talking about right now. I think it's about balance, and it's about making sure that the type of autonomy that Black women are afforded gives them the opportunity to construct the spaces that they need in order to be able to be sustained and be well. And
Mm,
I imagine that for most Black women, that means that there are many opportunities to be in networks that reflect their personhood. So many professional development experiences, women's leadership conferences, and certification programs, and we find ourselves in these places where we end up being, again, firsts and onlys. And so
Mhm.
supporting spaces where we can be inundated with people who share our lived experiences, I think is a tremendous contribution that an institution can offer to a Black woman. So allowing there to be the financial investments that are necessary to make those spaces live and to support leaders in having access to those spaces. A really small concrete example of an experience that exists on the campus that I'm connected to at the University of Pennsylvania is that there's an organization called Women of Color at Penn that holds a luncheon. And I know that there are so many women across that campus who would want to be in that space. And there's varied ways that people get there.
Mhm.
There's a ticket price. And for some people, their department or their school will make an investment for anybody who wants to attend to go. And then there are people in other spaces where they'll say, we're not giving any extra dollars for anybody to do anything. And so that means that the folks who are in that under that umbrella financially don't get to access that space. If we were committed to making sure that there are investments in opportunities where people can be around folks who affirm their life experiences, who live their life experiences, it would be universally, we're going to make sure that there's an investment that's available for everybody who can and wants to attend that type of thing. And to me, that feels like a small thing, but I think it's an important one. I also think about compensation, and that should be fundamental. But um, Black women higher ed administrators make 88 cents on the dollar to every white man administrator today.
Wow.
Uh, we are in 2025. The fact that we have pay equity issues still is amazing.
Diabolical,
Yeah,
absurd.
because there's just so much information that is public about this. There's a lot of work that has gone into exposing the inequities that have existed in pay. And so for that to continue to be a reality, again, it's creating transparency across pay structures. It's and ensuring that particularly when women of color are brought into situations that they are being equitably compensated for their work. It's paying attention to the ways that Black women, particularly if they're in predominantly white spaces, they're often doing a lot of labor that doesn't get rewarded in any formal systems, either because they're putting in labor to navigate that space, or because they're putting in labor to support other people to navigate that space, particularly faculty or staff or administrators to students. Um, and promotion systems typically don't reward that. Tenure systems certainly don't reward that. So there's a lot of ways that invisible labor takes place that doesn't get compensated. And uh, if you talk to just about any Black woman, they could tell you some categories of invisible labor that they believe they should be compensated for. And I think it's time for HR systems to start paying attention to those and thinking through how to, again, pay attention to pay equity in that way as well. So those are just a couple things that I feel like come up often around these types of conversations and that I
Sure.
definitely believe in.
Okay, go ahead, continue.
Yeah, no. I just those are some of the things that I think about often. I think people are talking about often and that I certainly believe in.
Sure. So you've mentioned the word investment a few times in this. So, what advice would you give to Black women who feel isolated or unheard in their academic or professional spaces?
Call me. That's what I would recommend. Let's help you find your home place. That's what
Okay, love that.
that's the one thing that I would offer. But I think whether or not that includes me, I do think there's just I believe in the power of community. I believe in the power of numbers. And so whether you find the folks who can be community to you on your campus or in that space, or if you double down on connecting with your community or building community outside, and it's I think beneficial to have a balance of both. Um, I think that we achieve so much, we accomplish so much when people see us, when we feel seen, when we feel heard, And I think the best ways for us to do that is just to get into partnership with others, to get in relationship with others, and to give them give ourselves space to be have those connections. So one of mine, something that I swear by in my life, is a community that I connected with through line dancing. Um,
Mm.
Shout out to the VP Posse. Uh, I met this beautiful collection of silver-haired black women in a park one day I was outside walking during the pandemic, and I'm a dancer girl. I've danced in lots of different ways in my life, and I could not do what these people were doing. I was so frustrated. I was like, I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't like, I pick up choreography kind of easily, and I could not do
Right.
what they were doing. And so I just was like, I'm coming back. And they embraced me as a person who they did not know. And I embraced them as people who I did not know yet, but it's like my soul knew them. Because
Sure.
being in the care and the loving hands of um, elders, it to me is one of the best ways to be nourished and nurtured, particularly at the season of life that I'm in. So now we refer to each other as aunties and nieces. And those are my people. And I have made lifelong relationships and friendships in that group. But and they have with each other as well. Somebody told me that for 25 years, some of them have been rocking with each other. But I say that to say that being in community can be one of the most powerful ways to exist and resist.
I love that. And in that I took it as it's not just about culture, it is definitely community.
Hmm.
So a mixture of both, but I definitely love that. So tell us what's next for you. Are there any upcoming projects or initiatives that we as hindsighters should be looking out for? Do you have any conferences that you're going to be speaking at that we can come to? And before you answer that, as you think of all that I just asked, guys, you can go to her Instagram at Dr. C.S. Boatswain. That is at DRCS Boatswain, Boatswain. So DRCS Boatswain. So make sure you go there. You can find those affirmations of that curated playlist that we were talking about and all the great things, and just follow her and support her. And I'll let her talk more to that as well. But go ahead and ask those what's next for you and all the great stuff.
Yes, thank you so much for that beautiful plug. Please join me on Instagram. I am always here just to uplift and to give us reminders of who we are and what we can gain by being in community with each other. So, a couple of places that we can connect in addition to that are for folks who are on Penn's campus. This might be a far cry, but if you happen to be on Penn's campus and attending the Women of Color at Penn luncheon, which is next Friday, I can't believe that date is here already, March
Uh-huh.
21st. I'll be there, and if you are on my email list, you will have some details really soon about how we can see each other and visit while we're at that luncheon. It's a busy time, but I'm looking forward to seeing lots of familiar faces and giving lots of hugs. I'll also be at the Black Women Studies Association conference, April 4th through 6th. That's a virtual conference, and so you don't have to go anywhere. There's a nominal registration fee, and that is particularly for women who are in academia, a wonderful opportunity to hear scholarly work that is intended explicitly for the stories and the experiences of Black women who are also in the academy. And then the following weekend, April 10th through the 12th, I'll be at what is now called Future World Changers in the Academy National Conference, previously known as Faculty Women of Color. And at both of those spaces, I'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit more about the work that I do. And if you're planning to be there, I would love to connect. So please come find me.
Absolutely. And one great thing about Hindsight is that we're an international platform. So we're 365 days, 24/7, international all over the country. So to those that are out there in her area, make sure you go and you support. And words that she used earlier in this conversation was invest. And so when you go to that one event that's virtual for the nominal registration fee that she said, nominal keyword, it's an investment of in a nominal investment for you to invest in yourself so you can hopefully find your community and get some great nuggets from that virtual event. You have no excuse. It's virtual. You don't have to go anywhere. You can be at the park, you can be in your car, wherever it is. Just give your attention and invest for that nominal fee. It starts right there. So, Dr. Boatswain, we truly, truly thank you so very much for your time and energy this evening, as well as your knowledge and just pouring into our listeners on this evening. Is there anything else you would like to say to impart on the listeners before we close out?
Well, thank you again for having me. This has been such a rich conversation, and I encourage everybody to continue to find your home place. Take care of yourself, stay rested, and stay hydrated.
Absolutely. Good night. So you will be hearing this on www.hindsightmediaradio.com, where there's always something good to talk about. Thank you again. Have a great night.